Okay, thank you all so much for your patience. We are going to start with our second workshop on due diligence. First workshop on due diligence. So due diligence, it's really the essence of like digging into the companies to try to figure out whether or not you should invest in them, right? So today we'll cover business models and strategy. We'll cover markets and competition, how to evaluate those things. And then we'll talk about deadlines and some of the deliverables that you'll have coming up. We're not going to do a team workshop, and then we will close, and I'll stick around for some questions afterwards. Just first deadline I want to highlight, October 21st. So that's tomorrow. Yeah, top 3 companies are due. If y'all have any questions on that, I'm happy to stick around and answer those. If you're nowhere close and you're still super interested, just come talk to me. We'll figure something out. Okay, so Mike Maples, Floodgate, an early stage kind of seed investor, has this quote. When they're looking for a company, he says, "We were looking for a pain so big that you needed a tourniquet. If you didn't get it, you were going to die." Those are the kinds of companies that he looks for. What do you think he's talking about here?
Company that's going to solve a pain point.
The opportunity.
Very outside.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes to that whole kind of discussion about investing in vitamins versus painkillers. Like vitamins are great, everyone needs them, they're good for you, but you're not going to take a bunch of, Centrum A to Z if you've got like a killer headache, right? You're going to take a painkiller to solve that pain, right? And in fact, you're probably going to pay a lot more money for that. How many people here take vitamins regularly? How many people have like Advil at home or some sort of like painkiller, right? It's like, you got to have that. It's like a necessity. So anyways, when you're thinking about and talking about pain points, you want to find not just, when you think about companies anyways, you're looking for companies that are solving a pain point that's not marginally better than the existing solutions, right? You want something that's like 5 to 10 times better. Because if it's marginally better, there's this whole discussion of switching costs. So it's going to be really hard for you to switch from one solution to another, right? You think about, I've been talking a lot with the folks over at Silicon Valley Bank. So SVB is just really well known for providing banking services, business banking services for really early stage companies. Like if you like just incorporated and you like are cashing your first check, SVB is probably the group that you bank with. I also met with Bank of America, and they're like, we're trying to take some of their customers to switch them over to us so that we can help them out with, debt products and some of the other products that we have from a banking perspective. But the service needs to be so much better because like at present, you are doing all of your payments, your payroll, your wire transfers, your deposits, all that is set up with all of your vendors and suppliers and so on and so forth. It's such a huge switching cost to go from one to another. So they really only are able to execute that when the company is getting ready to go public. And you need an investment bank like a Bank of America to take you through that process, right? And so when they take you through that process, they're like, okay, if you want us to help you go public, you're going to have to switch your banking services over to us. Like that's the only time they can really get those customers. Like that's how important it is. Anyways, all that to say, like the pain point has to be significant in order for customers to want to switch over. So if it's 5% better, it's probably not going to happen. It's too much of a hassle, right? If you've got one little feature, it's probably not big enough, right, to warrant switching services. Okay, who knows who this is? Yeah, Ray Kroc. Who's Ray Kroc?
The guy who took McDonald's big.
The guy that took McDonald's big. He's not the founder, right? The founders, I think, were like, their last names were McDonald. Mac and Dick, right? Yeah. Those are the brothers that actually started McDonald's. It was like one branch in, it was, oh man, it's been a while. What was that? The first branch?
I don't know.
Where it was?
I don't know.
I have no idea. I can't remember.
In the depths of America.
Yeah.
San Bernardino, California.
Is that what it is? San Bernardino. Oh, that's so funny because I grew up like pretty close to that.
Was not the first one.
It was. That was the first one.
Someone
they
Google
told
it.
us that
Check me. I'll put money on it.
Anyways, all that aside. Okay, so there's a story about, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen the movie The Founder, right? That's probably how you like recognize and I know a lot of the stories, but there's that scene with the guy from The Office where he's like, you're what business are you in? And Ray Kroc's the guy he's playing can't answer it, right? The way that it actually happened is that they're out with a bunch of friends at a bar and they were having this discussion like, hey, what business do you think I'm in? And so for those of you that have seen the movie, please don't answer. For those of you that haven't, what business do you think McDonald's is in? Yeah, what's that?
I mean, you're thinking about just fast food.
Right. They're in the business of fast food. Absolutely. That would be the right answer. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you have watched the movie.
But hold on. Okay. But what it's not just fast food that sets them apart, right? There's a dime a dozen burger shops. What was like really unique about them? Franchising was part of it. Cost, time, and convenience was a part of it, but from a nationwide perspective, why did they become like the fastest growing fast food brand?
It was not a dining. You didn't have to dine in. It was for takeout.
For takeout?
It was a unique thing at that time. Completely.
Sure. So it was cheap, it was fast, it was everywhere, right? Why did it grow nationwide so quickly? Why did it garner so much attention? Like, why did people fall in love with McDonald's?
It's a good type of business.
Part of it, yeah.
They did it quickly.
They did it quickly. The biggest thing that they were selling though, like, okay, if you go to a McDonald's in Iowa or McDonald's in, College Park, or if you go to McDonald's in San Bernardino, California, is there any difference in the quality or the type of, or the taste of the burger or fries that you're going to get? No, right? That's what they're selling. They're selling fast, convenient, and the exact same everywhere you go type of food, right? So if you're in, Japan, you're like, what, I really want like a burger right now. You can go to the McDonald's. It'll probably taste the same as the one in San Bernardino. They're selling convenience and they're selling also location, right? That's why they're all over the place. If you're driving up and down any highway, you'll see those golden arches every, several miles or so. It's kind of like the Starbucks business model, right? Just be everywhere. But more importantly, they're really selling consistency. Right? Everywhere you go, you know exactly what you're going to get. It's a couple of bucks for a burger. And it's really fast and easy. And they have that whole scene about like the guns that they use to put the ketchup and the mustard and all that. But okay, so the answer, what business are they really in? Real estate, right? Why is that important?
Because aside from using franchising as a source of revenue, they're also controlling the locations where the McDonald's is going to be created at, and they're receiving rent payments.
Yep.
So they have multiple revenue streams.
So they're earning money from their franchisees, but they're also implementing control that way, right? I know there was that scene where it was like someone was starting to do corn dogs and like popcorn or something like that, and they're like, no, we just want burgers and fries, that's it, and milkshakes, right? So anyways, they were able to implement control and then also just own all of the land that each one of these like really famous brand or like restaurants is on, right? And then get rent payments that way, and then own the land underneath it, right? Like that's a huge advantage, right? Okay. Illinois. What do you know? What city? Okay. Okay. Plain. We'll all right. We'll double check all of it. Zion doesn't seem too happy about it still.
Oh no,
Okay. So when you're evaluating business models and strategy, there are, in this discussion of pain point, you want to understand what is a pain point, right? Oftentimes what people can get wrong about companies, or what it takes people a long time to understand, is truly what pain point they're solving, right? As in the case with McDonald's. With McDonald's, it like took a while. I mean, if you hadn't seen the movie, I don't think any of you would have been like, oh yeah, it's a real estate company. Like it's not very obvious, right? You like So yeah, again, it's not always really obvious like what the pain point is that the companies are solving. So a couple of ways to go about that is, well, number one, what we do in the industry is talk to people, talk to their customers, right? What is the pain point that this service is solving for you? What would be better? What do you need? Like what pain point are they really solving here? I think that's probably the best way to understand that. And then understand who is feeling that pain point. So identify who the customer is, right? And then how does the company solve that pain point? So to illustrate these three questions and to kind of take a more like outside the box way of thinking about these questions is, let's use the example of Facebook. What pain point does Facebook solve?
Ease of communication.
Ease of communication, okay. Networking. You guys go on Facebook to network? Go on LinkedIn to network? That's probably where it's done, right? Communication's good. I mean, you still can network, right? There's all those like groups, like affinity groups that have like chat rooms and stuff on there or whatever, right? Okay. To stay connected to your friends and your family and things like that. Yeah.
It's like
With quick news. Yeah. Facebook Marketplace is great. Let's stick to the core. I love Facebook Marketplace though. What else? What else? Huh?
Advertising.
Advertising. Absolutely.
So that's not a pain point for solving for us
Yeah.
necessarily,
Well-
but it is something that they have incorporated in that work there.
It's not a pain point for us. You're right. Who's the customer of Facebook?
Retailers.
How do you find out who the customer is, right? It's who's paying for the service. Do we pay for Facebook? No. So there's this joke in advertising, or there's this like running joke anyways, that 50% of advertising dollars spent are wasted. The problem is you don't know which 50% goes to waste. Facebook solves that problem. You go on there, you put all of your personal information on there. Here are my hobbies. Here's what I like to do. Here are the concerts that I went to, right? Here's all this information that about me. And you're just posting it out there because you want your friends to know where you're from, where you've moved, what school you're going to, so on and so forth. Advertisers are like, this is a gold mine of data. Now I know exactly how to target you and exactly what's going to have a higher probability of closing the sale, right? So that pain point that they're solving is selling the wrong product to the wrong person, right? Now they know exactly how to target and what to sell.
Like one of those sayings, if you're not paying for the service, probably you are
To the product.
the product.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. So yeah, come on in if you want. Okay, so let's take that example, or let's take kind of how we discussed Facebook and then talk about Lyft. So let's start with the second question. Who feels the pain point? Who's the customer here? You and I? Okay. Anyone want to?
And taxi drivers. And
What's that?
taxi drivers.
Taxi drivers. You ever looked at, where does the money actually go? We're paying for it, right? But who's earning that money? Where does the majority of the ride fee go to?
To propping up the Lyft service.
It goes to the driver, right? I think I don't know what the split is today, but it used to be, I think it was an 84%, 16% split. 84% went to the driver, right? And so what pain point is Lyft solving for the driver? Finding riders, sure. Yeah, before you have to just like stand on the side of the road and put your hand up in the air. That's like archaic, right? Who does that? What else? What are the pain points does Lyft solve for drivers?
For one is safety.
Safety is a big one, both ways, right?
Yes. Drivers don't have to pay for medallions anymore.
Huge thing, right? Yeah. You wanted to set up a business as a taxi driver, you had to go and apply for and pay for a medallion, which like in New York is $100,000, right? And if I wanted to start driving Lyft tomorrow, I could just jump on it, put my car information in there, and boom, I've got a business. Right? What were you gonna say? Okay, yeah, lower barrier to entry. Yeah, exactly.
Security about getting the fare.
Yes, payment services, right? Yes, has anyone taken a cab?
No.
No. Yeah. It's like, all right, what is this? 2001? That's so funny. Yeah. So
like, let's sort of know how much.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like it counts up. So,
Yep. You're sitting there, just watching the numbers go up, and you're like, I don't know if I've got this in my
If
wallet.
you want to be surprised.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't have a cash.
And that's like the other piece of it is like, who carries cash anymore to pay a cab? They always get like, I used to take cabs, like I turned 21 before Lyft and Uber were like starting to get popular. So it was like, you're getting out of a cab. And the reason I say that is because I didn't like to drive drunk. So I took ride or cabs. All that to say, when you're getting out of the cab at the end of the ride, it's like you either have to have cash. And if you didn't, they would make such a big stink about it. They'd be like, oh, fine, I'll go ahead and get the terminal out, which they all have, by the way, right? Like they're going to take payment some way, somehow. And it was just like clunky, right? You had to sit there, they had to put the card in. Sometimes it would take forever, or they would manually key in your credit card. Like all those things were such a pain. And then like Lyft comes along, like, all right, cool. You want to be a taxi cab driver? You want to make a little bit of money on the side? Go ahead and go do that. We'll set you up with a business. We will find you riders. We will advertise for you. We will set up payment systems so you don't have to do any of that. And ultimately just kill the taxi cab business, right? In fact, taxi cabs are starting to try to compete by having their own like rideshare service. But it's all the same thing now. It's just rideshare. So to kind of bring it all back, right? Try to understand who the customer is and like who's like really feeling the pain point and who's paying for it. That'll tell you who the customer is. And then from there, try to understand how is that company solving that pain point. And then just make a list of like what you think the pain points are. And then you can start to rank them too, like how severe is the pain point, benchmark it against the other competitors and how they're solving that. We'll get into that here in a little bit. Okay, what is business strategy? Who wants to try to define business strategy?
I'll take a stab at it.
Do it. Let's hear it.
I'd say it's a set of coordinated initiatives that strive to achieve some level of performance.
A set of coordinated initiatives striving for a common goal. Basically, is that what I heard? More or less?
More or less, yes.
Anyone else want to try to define business strategy?
It's a way of achieving your goals. Business vision is a little different though. Vision is long-term and possibly not achievable. But business strategy is what you can do in short-term and have tangible results.
Achieve that vision. Okay.
How you solve that pain point in a profitable way?
It's a good one. Yeah, absolutely. We take a little bit of a different approach to it. We say that it is the art of creating monopolies, right? Okay. The FTC would have a field day with this, right? You're not allowed to create monopolies in business. It's not allowed, like legally, right? But ultimately, the companies that you're looking at investing in, you want to think, or at least you want to invest in the ones that have the capability of producing a monopoly in some way, right? So like Facebook for the longest time had a monopoly on like personal data and how it was shared and given to advertisers, right? Because of what's called network effects, right? Everyone is on Facebook because all of your friends are on Facebook, right? It's going to be really hard for another group to come in and set up their own social network where you're going to give them all of your free data, where they can start to advertise to you, because it's going to require that people start to move over, right? And you're not going to move over if all of your friends are already on this platform. And also Facebook is just, Meta is so big now that if you did have some other social media platform, they'll just buy you, right? So look, it's not always the case that a company is successful in creating monopoly, but if you go back to, actually, sorry, we're about to cover it here in a second, but the art of creating monopolies is just really centered around your ability to carve out and win a specific market that you're going after, right? So in that analysis, we like to talk about this, the different strategy types. Using this little chart here. So on the bottom, you've got, are they going after a really targeted or a niche market? Or are they going after a broad range of buyers? And then are you going after a low cost strategy? So something that's cheaper or something that's differentiated. Usually differentiation means that it's also going to cost more or it's higher quality. So that's one way you can think about it. Now, the way that we like to illustrate the differences between these different strategies is with shoe companies. Everyone understands that. Everyone wears shoes. It probably knows. Can fit companies into these different categories. So the first category, we'll do the broad range of buyers that's differentiated. So what shoe company goes after a really broad range of buyers, and it's probably a little more expensive than, I don't know, cheaper shoe brand, but anyways, yeah, go ahead.
BSG,
This is about what?
business strategy game. Because honestly, we're doing a simulation right now.
Really?
Exactly the same thing.
No way, really?
Also with footwear, and we have to adjust many things to compete with the classic.
They must have watched the University Growth Fund case competition from 2018. I have no idea. Well, I'm curious about that actually. No, we haven't.
It was just so similar. We
Yeah.
went through the exact same thing. So
No way. Okay, so what's the broad differentiation strategy? What's the example?
you're trying, well, in the case with shoe strategy, you give the most amount of different models.
Okay.
You go for as many buyers as possible.
Yep.
And the problem is you incur more costs, so therefore your product price is going to be more of a premium product.
What company fits that description?
Timberlands?
Nike. Nike is the one that I like to use because they have so many different products. They've got football cleats and soccer cleats and track shoes and tennis shoes and sneakers and basketball shoes, right? They've got shoes for all these different sports, but also casual shoes as well, right? And they're a little bit pricier. They're not, I'm trying to think of like cheap shoe brands right now.
Skechers.
Vans and Skechers, okay. Yeah, it used to be. Well, Chucks are still pretty cheap, right? It's like 30 or 40 bucks, isn't it? No? Yeah, I'm like living in the wrong decade. I haven't bought Converse in a very long time. So. Wait, how much are they now?
They're like 70.
What? No way. Damn. Y'all made them popular, ruined the price on that. Or inflation, I don't know.
The focus differentiation strategy.
Well, apparently, right? So yeah, let's move over to that one. What is a more focused differentiation strategy? So something that's going to be a little more expensive, but at the same time is going after a very small target. More luxury brands. WB.
Like the more like.
Not
common. They're going very expensive. They're like the OG ones.
Okay.
Everyone has.
I don't know that one.
Yeah.
What's that?
Like Aritzia, like fashion brands that are for working class women, are much more expensive than like a Macy's.
Okay. So I'm thinking like, what are the red bottoms called? Louboutins? Yeah. I'm thinking Jimmy Choo's. I'm thinking Allen Edmonds, right? Those are like really nice men's shoes that'll last forever, but cost a fortune. Well, that's like more fast fashion, right? Like 2 hours or an hour and you throw them away like that, or like really nice.
I'm thinking like gala.
And then,
For a special.
oh, like tuxedo shoes or something like
You're not gonna
that.
use them.
Yeah.
One occasion.
You're using them for like weddings and like galas, right? Yeah. Okay, let's move to the bottom right. So what is an overall low cost strategy that goes after a broad range of buyers? I think someone said them earlier. So Tom's is broad in the sense that like anyone can buy it, but they've got like really one type of shoe, right? It's just that recycled sole with some fabric on it, right? I'm talking about like different models, right? As you said, right? What's a company that has a bunch of different models, but that's cheaper?
Oh, shucks.
Shacks. Yeah, that'll sit kind of more niche because Shacks are technically basketball shoes, right?
The Skechers is all over the place.
Yeah. Skechers has the running shoes and the walking shoes and the track shoes. And I don't know that they have like cleats specifically, but yeah, they've got all sorts of different.
They got very crappy classic shoes.
Yeah.
They're hideous.
So they're a little bit cheaper, but they also like service a broad range, right? And so, all right, let's go to the bottom right here. What is a focused low cost strategy? So really cheap and like one model, right? Very niche market.
Crocs.
Crocs are kind of pricey though, aren't they? How much are Crocs? They're like 60, 70 bucks, aren't they? I'm just kidding. You probably here's the joke here. If you can name the brand, you're probably in the wrong ballpark already. Right. So the one that comes to mind here, it's like a commoditized product at this point. If you go to like a gas station in any like beach town or a convenience store, you're gonna find a flip flop in there that's like paper thin and made of like one little piece of rubber with the two tongs or whatever, and it's like $1. Right. There's a company probably in China or whatever that will like manufacture this and only this and just millions of them. Right. And sell them really cheaply. What was that?
We call that branded production in our simulation.
Branded production?
Yeah.
What?
That's private label, sorry.
White label, right? Isn't it?
They call it private labels.
Okay.
So we do whatever the customer would want.
Right. Oh, I see. Yeah. Just like put a little, like put
Put a red
Atlanta
name.
on the bottom or
Yeah.
whatever, like Florida. So yeah, all that to say, like this strategy is you are going to make one product and you're going to get economies of scale because you're going to produce that one thing. Maybe in manufacturing, you can produce it really quickly, or you can get like buyer power because you're buying so much of it, right? And then also supplier power. So anyways, that's like the low cost niche market. Shacks fit kind of like in here a bit. The difference being that Shacks are like Shack shoes are going to be a little more expensive than those little pieces of rubber. Right? That's the difference. Okay, so now what is the best cost strategy? So something that sits kind of all like right in the middle of it. It's like technically for a broad range of buyers. It's not on the pricier side, but it's not the cheapest either. It's not a little piece of rubber.
I think it's the other products,
Sure. Like what?
iPhones.
iPhones?
Yeah, it's not that expensive that it's going to be.
Bro, what's not expensive to you? It's $1,000.
Now it is.
Yeah.
So, like I'm on $700 right now.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like if you're buying an iPhone.
Yeah.
It is meant for a broad range of consumers.
Sure.
It is priced just right, technically.
I think, well, so I would argue that there's a middle brand, right? There's like Google has like a brand of phones,
Pixels.
the Pixels, right? They're cheaper. They've got the big face on them, right? Apple is it's going to be a higher end, right? Because like what other phones cost more than that besides like those like high end luxury, like no one even knows what the name of those brands are. They sell them in like boutiques or whatever.
Are you talking about the ones that have they're this thick and they have like a
Yeah.
processor in them?
They're like
so your
satellite
computer?
phones with like diamonds in them. Yeah. Yeah. But like as it relates to phones, like on the general scale of this, right? You're gonna, yes, broad range of buyers, sure, but not a lot of different models, right? Everyone has like one phone. And I would argue that the phone has barely changed in the past 5 models,
That's true.
except for adding like a camera, right?
A camera.
Yeah. Okay, going back to this? What's the one right in the middle? Not super expensive, not the cheapest, serves a broad range of buyers still. And the funny part is, I think, so Skechers is actually a really close one, but there's another brand that has gone out of business since, so maybe it's not the best cost strategy, but maybe you all heard of this brand before, popular in the 90s. What's that?
This is the brand. Oh.
What is it? Fubu. It's actually a good one. Fubu was a pretty popular brand for a bit, actually. No, this one you probably haven't heard of it. It's called Payless. Right.
Oh.
So Payless is like those shoes, like you're not going to recognize like most of the brands in it, right? It's like they're selling a lot of Nike, whatever. They were the cheapest shoes, but they also had a lot of different models. They were for men and women and children and toddlers and so on. Anyways, so these are generally like the different strategy types that we go after as it relates to who you're going after and then how much you're spending on it. Yeah.
Curiosity, where would a company
Where would a company achieve that?
like cheap?
Oh, Shein.
I'm just
I don't
wondering.
know. I don't know.
Fast fashion.
Yeah, it's fast
I
fashion.
think it's overall low cost leadership strategies. Down
Okay,
right.
so let me ask you, like, what's the average price?
$7.
Okay, and then do they have like, what types of, do they have a bunch of different models of shoes.
Everything
from, like,
from clothes, like all types of different
Okay.
clothes, men
Then-
and women.
Low cost.
Probably overall low cost leadership strategy, right? So they serve a huge range of buyers, but they're a little bit cheaper. Yeah. Fast fashion is an interesting phenomenon. Terrible for the environment too, but we'll have that discussion another time if you want. All right, any questions on the strategy types?
The reason why like the best cost strategy is because most likely you're gonna be given off with
Yeah, to an extent, I think it probably the easiest to get to because you don't have to differentiate significantly, but you can achieve a little bit of everything because you can create a monopoly. Like you can be the only company that does those thin little flip flops, right? And you can be the only company that does, $1,000 tuxedo shoes, right? That are like, oh damn, you're wearing those shoes. I know you made it. You know what I mean? Like to an extent, like the Rolex and the Pateks and all that, right? Those are like unique. They're monopolies in luxury watch brands, essentially. Not entirely right, because obviously I just named 2 brands. But anyways, okay. Any other questions on this? Okay, so who knows who Ben Horowitz is? We talked about him before.
Horowitz sounds like a guy with a lot of money.
Well, he would argue that he didn't have a lot of money when he started, but yes, he does have a lot of money now. It is Andreessen Horowitz. Yeah. Andreessen Horowitz, who we have talked about before, like one of the best venture capital funds in the world, started by Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz. And so he says, we invest in college dropouts with insane ideas going after tiny markets with no way to monetize that. What do you think about that strategy? Facebook is a good example of that. Yeah. Mark Zuckerberg dropped out. I don't know if the idea was so insane though.
What about the girl that was trying to draw blood and
Elizabeth Holmes.
yes.
Theranos. She dropped out because she thought it was like a cool thing to do. She's such a poser in that regard. The idea was insane, but the market was huge, and like you knew how to monetize that, right? So those were pretty clear. There's one company that comes to mind in this example. Launched in 2008. You probably all used it, but at the time when it started, we talked about this last time. When it started, the founder was renting out air mattresses, sort of Airbnb, right?
Oh yeah.
College dropout, the insane idea of charging people $10 a night to sleep on an air mattress on your floor, right? The market for that is really tiny. You're not going to make a lot of money doing it for $10 a night or whatever, right? But if you think about the vision, and also the timing was incredibly important here, but think about the vision of what this could become. Ultimately, you were leasing or you were renting out space that you owned, but that you were not monetizing already, right? So the reason Airbnb is such a great case study is because of the timing specifically, right? And they launched in 2008, which is right after the financial crisis, right? A lot of folks were sitting on property that they really just couldn't afford to make mortgage payments on anymore, right? So you've got this asset that's sitting there that's generating no money. In fact, you're having to pay a mortgage on it every month. What do you do with that in order to be able to make your mortgage payment? You can rent it out to people. It's just sitting there. And because the dollar cost or the average cost of that asset earning like no income was already low, it was like, okay, I can charge $40 because otherwise, my option was to make no money on it. So you have people renting out this asset for a lot cheaper than what you could stay at hotels for, right? And then all of a sudden you have all this real estate available where people can stay at, pay a little bit of money, cheaper than hotels. And then Airbnb went public, last year? I don't think their stock price is doing too great. We were investors, we got out last year, thankfully. So anyways. Yeah. Well, we still timed it. We could have waited a little bit longer, but I'm glad we got it where we did. Yeah. If we would have waited a month, it would have gotten better.
At which stage did you get it?
Like 2015, so that would have been like this year, the D, something like that. It was a growth stage company. Yeah, it definitely wasn't like we noticed this, right? No. So University Growth Fund also will not ever make that type of bet. We are a growth stage company, so we want to see that you have traction and customers and have proven product market fit and that you're beyond renting air mattresses. Actually, funny story about Airbnb. So the way that the founder first raised money, and the reason I remember this is because it was right around the 08 election. He went to a conference and was selling Obama O's. It was a cereal. It was Obama O's, and I forget what the other one was called. But anyways, that's how you raised his first like couple $100,000 by selling this gimmick, at like a big conference in San Francisco, and then use that and turn it into this multi. I don't know what their market cap is. There must be $1 billion. Yeah, they're $1 billion company. So, anyways, I digress. Okay, why do venture capitalists invest in big markets? Like, what's big? So, the way I like to illustrate this is by just talking about overall fund construction and fund sizes and things like that. So, if you have a fund that's $100 million and you are targeting, so this is going back to our example from the first or the second week, I forget, but you're targeting 10 investments of $10 million each. And remember that you want each investment to potentially return the fund. So they all have to return $100 million, right? Assume you get 20% ownership of each company, right? So even if you've got, $100 million company, like a $50 million company, that's only going to get you $10 million, which is great, which is what you want, right? But if you want to return your whole fund on just one investment, how much would that company need to sell for? You want to get $100 million back. You only own 20% of that company. How big is the company have to be?
5 times more.
Yeah. Well, and also you're only getting 20% of it, right? So 5 times 100 million, so $500 million is what the company has to sell for. Big number, right? Especially at the seed stage when you have no idea if this company is going to succeed or not, like if they've even found product market fit, it has to sell for $500 million. In order to sell for that much, depending on multiples, which we'll talk about next week, which are a little bit depressed right now, your company probably has to be doing $100 million in revenue. Okay. And so market sizes are generally, the general definition is how much money can your company go out and get based on the current business model, right? How much total revenue, if you signed every single customer, how much revenue could you generate? And so if the market is only, $1 billion market, like that's a big market, sure, $1 billion. But you have to get 10% market share of that just to get to your $500 million exit, right? That's actually really hard to achieve unless you're in that monopoly realm, right? But otherwise, getting 10% of any market is a really difficult thing to do. Like you oftentimes hear founders that are like, if we just get 2% of the market, we will be $1 billion company. And that's great, and they might be right. But if you look at the dispersion of the different companies in that market that are doing different flavors and going after the same customers, they might not ever achieve 1% market share. So that's always one thing to be careful of when you listen to founder pitches is if I only get X%, I can do this. Well, does anyone have that? And how big is that company, right? Do they have a monopoly? What is their competitive?
So is it better to look for pioneers in the field?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always great to find pioneers in the field, right? The problem is, can you identify that person in that company is a pioneer?
Doing more excessive research, figure out whether there are other companies like that, right? That's the thing.
If you have serial entrepreneurs that have had multi-billion-dollar exits, no matter what their next thing, Adam Newman, for example, you guys know who Adam Newman is?
It's the guy who created the WeWork, right?
He started WeWork, right? WeWork was a dumpster fire. I take that back. WeWork is a great company. The way he ran it is what turned it into a dumpster fire, right? And you're like, there's no way anyone's ever going to go back and fund this guy again. The guy closed a $300 million round on an idea from one of the top venture funds in the country, right?
And
like
basically on the same idea.
It's yeah, exactly. He's probably gonna like. Well, I don't want to say anything that's recorded on the internet. Like, it's just all that to say, like, with serial entrepreneurs that have had such a story, and look, WeWork could have been really successful if he hadn't done what he did, where he was like using company money to buy Yeah, he was using WeWork money to buy buildings to be put in his name, and then they would have to pay him the lease money.
Want to do McDonald's strategy?
What's that?
You want to use McDonald's strategy?
Yeah, I guess kind of. Yeah, but he was using company money to fund his own personal bank account essentially, or to build his own personal real estate portfolio, which was like the second SoftBank found out they were pretty pissed about that, right?
Is it legal?
I
I mean, it is his company technically,
Yeah.
right? But he has fiduciary responsibility for his shareholders.
So you have the issue of fiduciary responsibility. You have the issue of like using company money to fund your own. It's like technically embezzling, right?
Technically.
Right. But like he was like, oh well, if I own it and like we're slowly paying it off, right, through the lease payments, like you're making them whole. But if you're an investor and like that's what's happening, you're like, no, dude, you can't do that. This money is to build a business, to buy the properties that goes in the company's name. Because ultimately, look, if you have to sell that company, it's not like if WeWork had to sell and they didn't own the properties, Adam Newman would still be like making all that money residually, right?
Technically, if it's a leverage buyout in his own name, but then he pays off of the rent that WeWork is paying him, technically it's legal.
It's there's the issue of whether or not he is performing his fiduciary responsibilities. What's that?
I said there's conflict of interest.
Conflict of
Since you're
interest.
using
Yeah.
company's money to buy a name in his own,
Yeah.
they cannot be reflected in the company's balance sheet,
Yeah.
which in turn
It's
cannot be reflected in the value of the company.
yeah, that's a good point. Because if it's not going to if you're using company money to buy stuff and you're putting it in your own name, you can't do that. There's a whole bunch of like closing documents when investors will invest in your company. So the term sheet that we talk about, it's like 5 pages long typically. It outlines the terms of the investment.
Yeah.
When you actually close on a deal, that document is like 200 pages long that outlines a lot of these things. It's probably going to say, don't use our money to fund your own purchases and your own assets. So yeah, I'd be curious if there's like I'm sure if it ever got brought to court that he would be in a lot of trouble, but it's a good question. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer.
He's a fun guy.
Yeah. So going back to this, it's really important to identify, this is why VCs like big markets, right? Because if you're investing in a 100 billion market, then you don't have to get nearly as big of a market share. So going to your question of like, you want to find pioneers, you want to find pioneering businesses that have disruptive business models, because they can grab a ton of market share quickly, right?
Yes.
Think about the rideshare market, right? Uber and Lyft took a bunch of, one, they expanded the market, and two, they took a huge market share of it pretty quickly. Right. Now, over time, what's going to happen? Right. They're not going to be able to sit there and just rake in all the money from rideshare. You're going to have other companies coming in to compete and develop similar products. Similar with like Apple, right? They've got a bit of a monopoly. I would say it's like Apple versus Samsung, called a duopoly. And you've got a ton of other competitors out there, but the big differentiator there is the brand. Like Google could come out with an amazing phone, like features that beat Apple and functionality that beats Apple. And I'm sure there is a Google phone that does that. Everyone's going to stick to their iPhone because one, it's easy to use. People love the brand. More than anything, it's the brand. There's this book called Starts With Why. And they use Apple. Huh? Simon Sinek. A big thing, they use Apple a lot in that book because Apple is really good in the branding piece of it and getting their customers to both understand their why, like why Apple exists as a business, not just to make phones and computers and so on, but like what they stand for, and then to get consumers to buy into that brand, right? So their big thing is think differently, right? I don't know if you remember the commercials. Actually, if you watch their commercials, it's always like one person like dancing around, right? That was the Apple, what was that little word called? The shuffle, right? It was one person, right? They're never really going to show like a group of people because they value and they project individuality. That's like a big part of their brand. And thinking differently, right? Anyways, that's a total tangent, but all that to say, like people identify with the brand and that's why they all stick with Apple. Whereas like Samsung, at least here in the States, doesn't have nearly as strong of a brand, right? I would argue that Samsung's probably got a better phone. The cameras are better for sure. I don't know about like processing and all that, but like people just love the ease of use of the iPhone, how easy the user interface and the user.
They have a strong market in market share
In Asia, right?
in Russia.
In Russia.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have such a big variety of phones. By now they're like a low cost leader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that might be the case. They're closer to the manufacturer, right?
Like also the US.
That's crazy.
Yeah. But also it's like I think they're a little expensive somehow.
Right. Everyone's got one. I mean, they're like, you get one model per year, right? That's all you're gonna get.
There's something.
I think I'm still on like the 10 and I refuse to upgrade, but like by the way, we have a student of ours that he works at Apple. And he's like, yeah, there is built-in obsolescence, right? When your phone starts to slow down or like glitch and all that, that's like built-in. They do that on purpose.
It's done with a specific purpose. They either have to retain the battery
Mhm.
or they have to forego the speed of the phone.
Yeah.
So they go with the speed by the time.
Well, it's a little bit too of like when you upgrade different operating systems, like you have to make sure it updates appropriately with all the different phones and their processors, and they largely just ignore the other ones. And they'll just send the updates enough so that your phone still works, but not enough that it works nicely, right? Okay, so when we analyze markets, we talk about this idea of the TAM, the SAM, and the SOM. So TAM stands for total addressable market. So this is the total possible demand of your product. The SAM, and I'll use examples here to hammer it home. The SAM, that stands for serviceable addressable market, and SOM stands for serviceable obtainable market. So the SOM is basically like what you can, if you start a company, what are all the dollars that you can go after today, right? So we're gonna go back to Rose's Pizza again, our favorite. Rose's Pizza, the practical limits of their business model is to feed people in downtown from 9 to 5, and that's it, right? You can't feed the dinner crowd. You can't feed folks up in Alpharetta. You can't feed folks in California, right? And also you're limited by, they've got like 2 ovens in there, right? You're limited by how much capacity you can actually do, right? So let's just throw a number at it. They can do $2,000 worth of pizza a day, and they are maxed out based on the business. Now the serviceable addressable market is, let's say they open another location in Alpharetta, right? All of a sudden you've got $2,000 in downtown, you've got $2,000 in Alpharetta, right? So your SAM is $4,000, $4,000 a day. And then typically to calculate market sizes, you annualize those numbers. So just for this example, we're gonna do that. Now, the TAM is every single person that eats pizza in the world, right? If you were to open locations in every city in the US or in the world, what is the total demand for pizza in the United States? That is the overall big piece of the pie that you can go after. Now, the limitations are location, right? Who's here is familiar with Mr. Beast? For that, right? Mr. Beast doesn't have locations in every city in the US, but they do have a presence everywhere in the US, right? They're on Uber Eats anywhere you go. And the way they do that is by sending recipes and supplies to dark kitchens so that you can order it off of Uber Eats. They'll make it for you, and you have this like nationwide.
Is ghost kitchen a big thing?
Yeah, it's starting to be, definitely. Like there are commercial spaces where you like drive up and they've got like, you know, a dozen like kitchens. Really? That's cool. I think that's like gonna be the future of it, right? Like the limitations of brick and mortar are can be collapsing. When you think about like Mr. Beast and how quickly that brand expanded, I think over time you get a bunch of these different brands to do that, and then just make things like why would you want to lease a space and deal with all the cool, I'll pay you a little bit extra to make this food, my margins go down, but all of a sudden I'm a nationwide brand, right? Let's see. Another way I like to think about this is like we've looked at insurtech companies, right? So insurance companies, it takes a long time for them to get licenses in different states, right? So the SOM for one of the companies that we looked at was like Texas, California, Georgia, right? Those are 3 states to operate it in. They're like, in the next 12 months, we're going to open up 14 states. So your SOM becomes all the insurance sales in those states and only those states. Your TAM is how much insurance premiums you can earn nationwide, plus what other ancillary products like on the roadmap can you add to that, right? So if you're just doing car insurance today, maybe it's like, if you're just like, let's talk about life insurance. If you're just doing life insurance today, what if you offer like term versus permanent? So one is like term is when you're like, 25 years old, you want to get life insurance for a span of 10 years. Permanent is you're 70 years old and you want to get life insurance until you die. Like insurance companies know that you're gonna have to pay that premium out. Whereas term, it's like you're betting on a person not dying in their 30s. So anyways, different products, right? And then let's say you take a step back and like, okay, I'm also going to add homeowners insurance, pet insurance, car insurance, blah, 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 right? All these different insurance products. Now, if there is no indication that they're ever going to go that big and get those different insurance products, don't include that in your TAM. Just to say, oh, it's the insurance market, right? If it is auto insurance and that's all they're ever going to do, that is your TAM, right? Don't go bigger than the company will feasibly ever go. When you're analyzing markets, we talk about market drivers and market risks, right? So what are some of the trends that can either grow or shrink the market, right? So you can talk about demographics and population. Specifically with boomers. So, I think like 10 years ago, there was a lot of money going towards health tech and like med device, because they knew you've got this like aging population of boomers that's actually bigger than the millennials and Gen Z and so on. They're going to need a lot of money for spent on healthcare. They're going to spend a lot of money on healthcare as they get older. They have these ailments and they get sick and things like that. So you had a lot of money flowing towards med device and health tech companies, right? That was like a trend that was happening pretty recently, still like 5 years ago. It's still happening today. Another thing is technological advances. So who here knows what Moore's law is? Moore's law.
Number of transistors
And what are the implications of that?
or technologies capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah.
More law is basically they're adding very maximum amount of transistors. Now they have to come up with new ways to.
Right. So ultimately, what it kind of boils down to is every, what was it, like 5 or 10 years, like technology grows exponentially, right? And so if you're starting to increase processing power, then you can increase the things that you do with that processing power. So autonomous vehicles, right? You need to ingest and process so much information at one time in order to have a car drive itself down the street, right? If you think about Uber and Lyft, to have a phone that can track you like wherever you are at any given moment to send a car right to your location, you couldn't have done that 20 years ago. 20 years ago. We're going to stick with that. And then I will even take it further back, right? The phones that I grew up on were these little Nokia bricks that were really well known for playing this game called Snake. They were not digital screens. You couldn't text on them. They weren't touchscreen at all. They were use T9 predictive text. Anyways, there's no way you're ordering a Lyft on that or an Uber. You can talk about the product life cycle. So as products like 1.0, 2.0, as things start to develop and technology gets better to make those things progress. So I think about that's a good one. I guess, cell phones, right? Going from bricks to the touchscreens that you have now that have like really little innovation year to year, in my opinion. Another really good one to look at is external factors like laws and legislation. So we talked about, blanking on the name, the Biden Act, where they're dumping a bunch of money in renewable energy. The Inflation Reduction Act, right? There's going to be $740 billion going to renewable energies in the next like 10 years. Probably want to be investing in climate tech companies, right? Conversely, if that did not pass, right, for the past 20 years, the government has been incentivizing the installation of solar panels, which makes it so that it's somewhat affordable to own and install at your home. Otherwise, if you paid for it straight up, just cash, like it is not economical to do that. The numbers don't actually work out well. Or the payback is like 17 years, which doesn't make sense because the lifespan of a panel is 20, right? So if these incentives did not renew, then a lot of people were expecting solar panel companies to, start to go out of business, or at least like the demand to decrease significantly. Another one that happened recently, I should have pulled up their stock price. It's a company called Eargo. So the FTC passed this law that says that you can now sell hearing aids over the counter. Whereas before you had to go to an audiologist, get a prescription, and they cost like $2,000. Eargo and this other company, you can get hearing aids for $200, just like online, right? And their stock price shot up like 60% in a day. Right? Network effects are really important, right? So we talked about Facebook, but like the original network effect that we talked about are fax machines. Fax machines are okay. Fax machines are only useful if someone else has them, right? Which is why they're so useless today, because no one has them. So if someone ever tells me to fax them, it's just like, cool, I'll fax it to you in 2002 when people still had fax machines. They're only useful because other people have them. And then you've got customs and culture, specifically fads, right? You want to be wary of those things. So NFTs, right? There's this whole, the original NFT fad was the story of like these tulips in Holland, I want to say. The tulip mania, right? That's like a well-documented like finance story that people talk about as it relates to fads. These tulips were going for like hundreds of dollars a bouquet just because they had this really cool color. And that was also about driving demand. But anyways, they were just like so wildly overpriced because people were just like really hyped about it. I think NFTs kind of had fallen into a similar light. I think there's still utility behind them, just like there is in like a nice bouquet of flowers, but it was definitely inflated for a little bit there. Tickle Me Elmos, there was like a Christmas season where they sold out like weeks in advance, and there were like stories of parents fighting for like the last one at Christmas stores. Like you'll probably see that in movies and stuff. I forget why this one's on here. Y'all know what this is? This thing?
Oh my god.
Y'all have you used one before?
Yeah, like when I was like 5.
Yeah, that makes sense. Tamagotchis were super popular for a little bit. It was like this little digital pet that you would take care of on this like keychain device. And you would press a button to feed it, press a button to take it out to go potty, to take it for a walk and stuff like that. Anyways, also a fad. I don't think people own those anymore. Hoverboards, right? Those were really popular for a little bit, right? I think Heelys were popular for a bit. Here's another one though, gluten-free, right? I don't know if that's a fad or not, but there are a lot of like restaurants and like food products that are really focused on being gluten-free, or at least finding ways to make their products gluten-free so you can start to capitalize on that market as well.
Dietary stuff is
I think, yeah, diets are definitely like the Atkins and whatever. What's that? Weight Watchers, yeah. Although Weight Watchers is like still a successful company, which I get it. I mean, I do get it because people like, if you look on, oh man, I forget exactly what it is. There's just, if you look at any magazine, they're always going to have 4 things on it. I forget what the 4 things are, but one of them is always about weight loss. Or like, how do you build a better body or whatever, right? Because that's like what's always going to grab your attention and get you to buy that magazine. Okay, let's talk about competition. So, okay, there's this idea of the value chain, right? So the value chain is at every step in producing something, like where can you add value, right? So when you think about the value chain of manufacturing a car, you've got the raw materials, right? Just the steel and the aluminum and the metals that go into it. And then you have to manufacture it. So you actually have different OEMs that will take this raw materials and turn it into car parts. And then they'll actually, at that point, send it to like the Toyotas to actually assemble the vehicle, right? In this example, we're going to talk about sandwiches. So okay, this goes into Porter's 5 forces a little bit too. But when we're talking about sandwiches, right, you have to, the raw materials are like the dough or the flour, actually. And then you have to take that flour, turn it into dough, put it in the oven, right? That's a manufacturing process. And then you have to take that sandwich and the meat and the lettuce and the tomatoes and the mayo and all that, put it in a little sandwich and then sell it to people, right? That's the distribution piece of it. And so at each point, there are different companies that add value to the process of making and selling a sandwich, right? So when you are looking at the companies that you are potentially going to underwrite for investment, you should understand the value chain, right? They may not be in every step of it, and that's totally fine. You will find companies that are really good at distributing sandwiches, right? Subway, they're everywhere. McDonald's, actually, if you consider that a sandwich, right? And there are a handful of companies that are really good at making bread, right? So Wonder, Nature's Own, right? So on and so forth. So you want to understand, is that company going to be, vertically integrated in that they cover every step of the value chain? Are they going to be a point solution where they cover like one point of that process really well, right? So you just want to understand that. Okay, so we're actually going to start to talk about Porter's five forces a little bit. So oftentimes what people get wrong about Porter's five forces is that they use it to analyze a single company and how it fits within and use it to analyze one company. You're supposed to do Porter's five forces on like a general industry, right? So when we're talking about the sandwich making industry, right? Let's talk about supplier power. In the sandwich making industry, if there are one or two folks that make and manufacture bread or like supply bread, they're going to dominate and control the entire market, right? Because they can control the price. Think about OPEC, right? They can control the price. If you have like 1,000 suppliers where you as the buyer have your pick of the litter, then you can start to negotiate your price. You're like, look, I am going to be the one selling the most sandwiches, so you should give me the better price. Right? So control. So understanding supplier power can be really important. And then on the other side of it too, it's like if buyers have power, right? As the buyer, do I have multiple choices? And if so, then you have to market to me better. You have to have a better product, or you have to be cheaper. Those are some of the things that you need to do to compete. And in the middle, right, in the case of the sandwiches, it's like you have this rivalry amongst sandwich makers, right? So you've got, what's the one down here on Broad Street, or is it Broad Street? Reuben's Deli, right? Reuben's Deli is going to be competing with, what's another sandwich place nearby?
Jimmy John's.
Jimmy John's, yeah, right? On the same street, you're competing with Jimmy John's. And then Jimmy John's is competing with the Subways of the world, although I'm pretty sure the closest Subway, total aside here, is the one where someone got shot at for like putting too much mayo on the sandwich. You guys hear about that?
Oh,
Yeah,
here?
that happened like downtown. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the one behind one.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not fun.
Sorry to bring that up. Okay. Another one of the five forces is the threat of entrance, right? So how easy is it for other sandwich companies to come in and set up shop, right? Probably not that hard. I mean, if you find a lease that's open for a commercial space down here, you could probably set up a sandwich shop pretty easily. Bread's cheap. It's easy to make sandwiches. You can buy mayo and ketchup and whatever, all the condiments and stuff anywhere. So it's easy to set one up, right? It's not necessarily easy to carve out your own niche, right? And be like the most successful sandwich maker. And then the other side of it is, are there substitutes, right? So what need does a sandwich satisfy? Right, hunger, but specifically, like if you can go get, I don't know, why would you get a sandwich instead of going to, gosh, what's like the name of the popular steakhouse? What's that? Yeah, it's cost and convenience, right? So what replaces, like, what is a food item that is both cheap and convenient? Right, so pizza is one of them. There's that Chinese food place, right? There's tacos. I'm like thinking about all the restaurants on Broad Street now. There's that burger place. There's that Korean food place. There's that. Anyways, you have all these different substitutes that you're gonna that will compete for the dollars that you want to be going after, right? So when you think about competition, it's not always going to be exactly the companies that, all the other sandwich companies, right? You think about what product and what pain point your company is solving, and if there are other companies that are solving that same pain point. So to illustrate, there is a company that we absolutely love. It's called Kinley. In fact, Donald Hawkins was here last week talking about that, right? So Kinley provides banking services specifically for the Black community, right? Do you think that the only competitors are going to be Greenwood? And there's one that Kevin Hart is like a spokesperson for. But anyways, it's going to be these other ones, right? It's going to be Chase and Wells Fargo and so on and so forth. They're not necessarily going after the same customers, but they're still solving a similar pain point, which is I need a place to store my money, to be able to move it around and pay for things digitally, right? So it's important not to get just bogged down in going like thinking about the companies that are really head to head. Think about who else is solving the pain point, maybe just in a different way. Okay, it's really important to, like, when you want to figure out what factors will determine who will win, you really have to understand the customer and the pain points, right? And understand why that market exists, right? A lot of times, look, talk to customers. That's the best way to do this. That's how you'll know exactly what is the most important thing to them, right? It's not just like features, and it's not just, not always UX, and it's not always branding, right? Talk to them. It might be price for some people. It might be one specific feature or utility or what have you, right? So talk to customers to try to figure out what will win. Now, the other way to do it too is just to like make a list of the pain points that they're solving. And then go to their competitors' websites and see what other features match up on that, right? And start to see like what's really important and why people use that service, like what pain point they're solving. So in the example of Kinley, it's like, yeah, you can get banking services from JP Morgan and from Chase and Wells Fargo and Bank of America. But specifically what they're solving is for the historical racial inequity in banking services for the Black community. Specifically, how they're going to generate or help the community generate generational wealth. And also, as it relates to financial literacy, right? That's a big component of it, which, you can say Wells Fargo and Bank of America have some of those things that help with financial literacy and things like that, but not to the point that Kinley's going to have it, right?
It's going to be a standard.
What's that? Yeah, well, so they have this PhD, Melody Wright, on their team, right? And her whole job is to educate on financial literacy. And sure, can Bank of America hire that person? And do they have that person? Probably. But is it their focus? Probably not. And so when we talk about like where you sit on the value chain of things, like you are serving a specific demographic very well, and so you can win customers based off of that. Specifically, and I didn't want to really talk about this, and Donald definitely knows about this. The name of the game in neobanking, or just the banking space in general, is customer acquisition, specifically how cheaply you can acquire customers, right? Because there's going to be a community around it, because there's this notion that you can promote your brand really well through celebrities and influencers within your community, that once you get a certain, like a critical mass of people to use your product and service, they're going to tell all their friends about it. And they're going to start to use it. And they're going to tell their friends about it. And there's this element of the company just going viral and then capitalizing all these customers, relatively inexpensively. Okay. Going back to, okay, so this is like a sort of a market map or a way to sort of benchmark different competitors in the space, right? And so what I really want to point out is you've got all the companies on the left-hand side are really good point solutions, meaning that they solve one problem really, really well. And you've got this whole group of other folks down here that have these comprehensive solutions that they build in-house. They're like, we're going to do everything for you, but it's never going to be nearly as good as the companies that focus on one thing, right? We had this company called Cuberhood that was like, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build a solution that has APIs that will tie into all of these point solutions, so you can leverage the strength of these individual companies in a sort of comprehensive platform. Right? The problem with these ones down here is like they just do a lot not really well. They're like the jack of all trades, right? master of none. These are the masters of one, and Hero Hood is leveraging all that. And look, there's money to be made on each side of it. So it's up to you to understand, what the strategy is of the company that you're looking at and whether that's the right strategy or not. So this is like one way to kind of illustrate that. Okay, so when you're analyzing competition, you want to know who the top competitors are. Oftentimes, you can just ask the company and you should be in contact with these companies. So you can ask them who their top competitors are. And they should tell you. It's actually like a red flag if they completely gloss over like their biggest competitor. Right. So you talk to Donald, his biggest competitor is Greenwood Bank, which is an Atlanta company. There's like the former mayor is part of the company. Killer Mike is like the spokesperson of it. It's really funny because when you get on investor calls with him and someone's like, well, what about Greenwood Bank? He's like, I don't know who Greenwood Bank is. And they're like, well, dude, it's your biggest competitor. And like, he sets that up as a joke and he like farms the crap out of that joke. Every call I've been on, he always like traps people that ask that question. But he's like, yeah, I know who Greenwood Bank is. Your company should know who they're competing against, who their biggest threat is, and they should know how they're better than them or why they're better or where they will win. Look, Greenwood Bank is well funded by like the top banks. If you look at their investor list, it's like a who's who of like the Wells Fargo's, and I think SoftBank might be in them. Kinley's investor base is a little bit different. But actually to us, we think that's a competitive advantage. We'll get into that like another time. You want to figure out what factors will determine who will win, right? So it might not be that you have the best features. You might have one feature that the company does really well that everyone will come to your platform for, and then your other features are just good enough, and that's okay. And you'll still win market share that way. Right, so what are the factors that will determine who will win for like website search with Google, right? It was specifically speed and quality, right? Those are big things. Why Google won, as an example. What are the factors that will determine who won in Facebook? It was the network effect, right? So going back to that. It might be, look, and that's a big threat of the Kinley versus Greenwood argument is that Greenwood is so well funded. And the thesis is that you're going to be able to acquire acquire users inexpensively. If you get into this battle of customer acquisition cost, one company is going to be a lot better funded than the other. The whole thesis of these companies is that will never happen. So hopefully it never gets there. That remains to be seen. And then also, what are your sources or what are your company's sources of a competitive advantage? What about the company is unique that can't be copied, right? So we talk about price. You should never use price as like a competitive advantage. So to illustrate this, So to illustrate this, I have to tell a story about Delta and Southwest in Salt Lake City. So in Salt Lake City, Delta had command of like the best terminals. Their gates were closest to the entrance. They really had a monopoly on it, right? It was a Delta hub. And Southwest came in, they're like, we want to come in and set up shop here as well. And obviously Delta was like, I don't know, we don't want you to sit here. And so they got into this pricing war, right? And look, Southwest was the cheaper budget airline at the time, right? So let's say, Delta was $600 and Southwest would have been like $400. Delta started to drop their price to compete. And then once Delta did that, Southwest would compete back, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, it got to a point where Delta was losing money on every ticket that they sold. The difference being Southwest wasn't. And why is that? You think about the amenities that Delta offers, right? Delta's got the Sky Lounge. They've got TVs and all the headsets. They've got hot foods and things like that. They've got international flights. They've got business seats, right? Like a real first class. All expenses. Yeah, exactly. So you think about these things, right? Southwest has one type of plane, which means they've got one type of pilot, which means they've got the same parts for every single airplane, right? So you don't have to have a bunch of different things on in stock. You don't have to have a bunch of different technicians trained up. You don't have to have a bunch of different pilots with different skill levels, right? If you have just peanuts and pretzels, you don't have to have cold food storage, right? You don't have to have a way to heat up food, right? The TVs cost a little bit more. What else? I don't know if Southwest has like a sky club or lounge, but that's going to be expensive in itself. To have gates that are closest to the entrance, that's going to cost more money. So international flights, right? That's going to cost more money. All those things, right? Delta's core operating cost was always going to be higher than Southwest's. So on a price basis, Southwest was always going to beat them out if they ever got into a price war. So Southwest's source of competitive advantage was how inexpensively they could operate their company. Delta could never compete with that. They got to a point where they sort of had this like unspoken agreement, like, okay, we're not going to compete on price anymore. You can come set up shop at the Salt Lake City airport. Everything's going to be okay. They essentially, ultimately, they're going after different customers, right? Delta is going to be more business facing. Southwest, which I love Southwest, but it's still more of like a budget airline. Still back in Spirit, yeah. But there's like Spirit also feels like a need, right? It's still budget, and those flights are still full, right?
I've done
I've done it, dude. I've done it. I can't do it so much anymore as I'm getting older. Like, dude, those seats are like literally this thin. You walk by them, it's just like a piece of metal with like a little bit of fabric on it, right? Like I can't do it anymore. But anyway, like if you have to get from point A to point B inexpensively, oh yeah, like they cancel their flights all the time too. So, when you go back to it, it's like that's why they can do that, because Delta, they have to get their passengers from point A to point B. In fact, as a customer, that's why you pay a little bit extra, or that's why businesses pay a little bit extra, right? Because they want to know that the likelihood of you getting to your destination on time is a lot higher. That's why they won't put you on Spirit, even though it could save the company thousands of dollars a year, right? If you're talking about business expenses, but you're paying for it in missed flights, and that person that is expected to fly to New York to close a deal is tired. Someone was, he couldn't watch TV and be entertained. All these things, right? You want to have someone fresh and ready to close deals, right? Okay, so going into our diligence write-up, I will send out an email to confirm this. I think we're just going to do an investment deck instead of like a full investment memo. What we do at University Growth Fund are full investment memos of like 40 to 60 pages long. I think we're just going to do a deck for y'all, but it should be comprehensive. It shouldn't be like just a picture, right? Because we're going to have to go through all of your decks and like understand the content that you put in there. So if you look at like investor decks, a lot of times they're like very dense with content, right? So it's going to be a mix. It's going to be like somewhere in between those two things. So you should answer these questions, right? What is the pain point? Who is the customer? And how does the company solve the pain point? And then also specifically, how does the company make money off of it, right? That's a really important piece of it. You should do a market sizing. So how big is the market? How many dollars are there in the in that market that they can go after, right? If they want every single customer, how much money does that represent on an annual basis? And so split that between the TAM, SAM, and the SOM. If you'd like more information on how to calculate that, there's some really good YouTube videos out there. Or you can email me and I can point you in the right direction. But also, how quickly is the market growing, right? What is driving that growth? What are the market drivers, right? Is it a fad? Is it legislation? Is it demographics, right? So on and so forth. And then who are your competitors, right? Who are your top competitors that go head to head with you? But who are also the competitors that are solving a very similar pain point that you still have to worry about? How is your company positioned against them? And then what are the sources of competitive advantage is a huge thing in venture capital, right? What is your unique approach to product or service? And so you can use tools like the Porter's Five Forces is a good one. We talked about that today. There's another one that that we studied in business school called the VRIN, I think, table. It's you look at companies that benchmark to see whether it's valuable, rare, inimitable, so not copyable, and then I forget the last one. Anyways, if you look that up, that's like another good way to identify a competitive advantage. Yes, the VRIN or VRIO. I can't remember what the last letter is and what it stands for. So But it's a good way to identify competitive advantage. Because then you start to list like what the company does and how they do it, and then benchmark it to see, is it a sustainable, not is it a competitive advantage, is it a sustainable competitive advantage? Okay, next workshop is next Thursday right here. We will have pizza again and drinks. The top 3 companies are due October 21st. I sent out an email earlier this week. Maybe it was yesterday or today. Anyways, there's a Google form where I want you to submit those top 3 companies, company name, the URL, so the link to their website, and then why you like that company. That is due tomorrow. Yeah.
So if we're looking online, our resources are not as elaborate as visual.
Sure.
But to understand whether it's a seed company or not, do we look if it had a seed round already? It's technically after that is Series A, right?
Yeah,
But it could be a seed number 2. So
Right.
question.
that's fine. If it's a C2, that's still fine. Even if it's like a Series A, we're really looking for just like early stage companies that have like,
So it doesn't have to be just seed.
doesn't have to be, but like the problem being, if you're looking at pre-seed companies, you're not going to have a lot of good financials, right?
Yes, yes,
So that's
yes.
why you can't, that's why we stay away from pre-seed. If you're looking at Series A companies, you might get, you're not going to find like, this is the next big thing, right?
So Series B is already mid-cap, right?
It's too big. Yeah. Like, and look, the nomenclature is like a little fuzzy these days anyways. Like what's a seed, what's a Series A? Generally, seed is you found product, you're still testing product market fit. Series A is you found product market fit, right? But anyways, earlier stage companies that have some financials, that's really what we're looking for. Early companies that have some traction.
And do you care much if it's in technology field or not?
No, but I think a big piece of it is like, can it scale quickly? Are there buyers for it, right? Going back to our checklist from before. It doesn't have to be, but like, why are you thinking about like a hardware company? WVCs in Atlanta are scared. I mean, not scared, they hate hardware.
We have 2-in-1.
Yeah.
That is
Hardware plus tech? Absolutely. Yeah. I like hardware plus tech. Yeah. I'm also not a judge, so it's not like it doesn't matter what I like. Yeah, go ahead.
Do they have to be concurrent to your final?
No, so if you end up not using one of the 3 companies, it's totally fine. Like if you pick the 3 companies and you're like, holy crap, all of them, all the founders are, you know, murderers and robbers, like you could pick another company, it's fine. Okay, so your due diligence report is due on November 4th, right? So your final like deck, I'll send out like an outline of everything that is going to be required of that. But that's due November 4th. What we're going to do after that is evaluate all of them internally and then pick 5 teams to go on to the semifinal pitch. Those 5 teams will get matched up with mentors. So senior associates and associates from Atlanta funds to help you get your deck together so that you can pitch it at the semifinal event. And then the semifinal actual pitch is going to be November 17th here at Georgia State. It will probably be this room. I think it is. And then we will pick one winner from the 5 that will pitch. And then that winner will go on to compete in the nationals. It'll be virtual, but you'll compete with the winner from San Diego and Salt Lake City. So that's it. That's all I've got for you tonight. Thank you so much for having me.